wall. Now I want to make a break on my speech to call your attention here to the right-hand century. And that man, that bronze statue, represents one of the Republic revolutionaries that some years later, after the Republic Revolution, some years later even became President of Republic. So it was one of our first Presidents of Republic. And as I was telling you, we know this because we have found here in Lisbon many century came two Germanic tribes. They were different, although they originated from the same Germanic family. They were called the Suevi and the Visigoths. Well, this was the area of Lisbon, and in 714, so in the beginning of the 8th century, Lisbon became a Moorish city. And the Moorish people were going to stay here for many, many centuries, from the 8th up to the middle of the 12th century. Well, like the Visigoths, to expel the Moorish people out of Portugal, out of our country. And it was also in 1250, as I told you before, that Lisbon became the capital of Portugal. And it's very interesting because the borders, the frontiers that we had back then in 1250, when we expelled the Moorish people, so the borders that we had back then are almost the same ones that we have nowadays. And that's why we are considered the oldest nation of Europe. Portugal is considered the oldest nation of Europe because we have the same frontiers, the same borders, since almost the same ones since 1250. So since the middle of the... It was just in 1492 that the Catholic kings, Elizabeth and Ferdinand, the Spanish Catholic kings, Elizabeth and Ferdinand, were able to at least leave the facade, rebuild the facades, restore the facade, and then if they want they can just tear down the rest of the body of the building and build a modern one. But the facades they have to leave. The old facades, the old beautiful early 20th century facades, they have to leave it, to rebuild it, because as you're going to see, some buildings are really very, very nice, very beautiful. And so nowadays, little by little, they are being restored. Centuries, I told you, they settle on the area of Alfama. In Alfama it is a Moorish word in the Portuguese vocabulary. Afterwards, after showing you Alfama, we are going to drive past along the Lisbon port, and we are on our way to, we'll be on our way to Bethlehem district. Bethlehem district is where we are going to make our 3 stops this morning. It's a very beautiful district. It is very much related to the Portuguese maritime expansion of the 15th and 16th century, because it was from Bethlehem district, from the beaches of Bethlehem district, that some of our most important famous navigators set sail, like for example Vasco da Gama. I'm sure you have heard the name Vasco da Gama, the man, the Portuguese navigator that found the maritime route to India in 1498. So this district, Bethlehem district, is very much related to the Portuguese maritime expansion, and it has some of the most beautiful buildings, some of the most beautiful monuments that we have in Lisbon. That's why we're going to make our 3 stops there this morning. Okay, 1755. It was an earthquake, a huge earthquake that was felt not only here in Portugal, in Lisbon, because it destroyed almost all the area of Lisbon that existed back then in the 18th century, but it was not just felt in Lisbon. It was felt in the north of Europe, it was felt in the north of Africa. So it was really a huge earthquake that destroyed all the area of Lisbon close to the Tagus River, all that came from the river, that came from the Tagus River, that flooded all this area, and there were also huge fires that burned for over a week. Thousands of people going to see the beautiful 18th century buildings that were built after the earthquake of 1755. It was on the 1st of November of 1755, it was All Saints' Day. People were in the church, there were the candles, so with the ears. And the other one, just crossing the street, also to the left hand side, is covered because it is also a 20th century building, early 20th century building. It is very, very damaged. It's covered because it's being restored, it's being completely restored. And if you look here to the right hand side, to the sidewalks, I want to call your attention to these very nice sidewalks that we have here in Portugal. The sidewalks that are made with this small stones. So the sidewalks here in Portugal, this is a very Portuguese tradition, not just here in Lisbon, but all over the country. You see this sidewalk paved with these small cubes of stone, white limestone, black basalt. As I told you, we are going to see, not just here in Lisbon, but you can see all over the country, many different patterns for the sidewalks. And this is a very Portuguese tradition. You can see this man here to the right hand side. He's making the sidewalks, you see, rebuilding the sidewalks. They are all made by hand. They are all handmade. And this is a very Portuguese tradition, as I told you. We have another example here to the left hand side of a building that was restored, an old building that was restored. This one was also very abandoned, but about 5 years ago they completely restored it, and now it is a very, very pleasant shopping center, small shopping center. The traffic becomes like this, very, very heavy traffic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, in front of us at the far end, the statue on the top, that's a bronze statue of a man with a lion by his side. You know that still nowadays, a lion, this animal, it is a symbol of power. And this man that is represented on this bronze statue, it was a very powerful man back in the 18th century. He was the Marquis of Pombal, and this man, the Marquis of Pombal, he was for about 27 years the Prime Minister of our King Joseph I. This King Joseph I, he ruled Portugal 27 years between 1750 and 1777, and during all this time, this man, the Marquis of Pombal, today he has a seagull on his head, and this man was his prime minister, and he was a very important man because he made lots of very important reforms in the country, in different areas, in education, in commerce, in industry, in agriculture. And this man, the Marquis of Pombal, for the rebuild of the city after that huge earthquake that happened on the 1st of November 1755 that I told you about, remember? So after the earthquake, it was these two men, our King Joseph I and this man, the Marquis of Pombal, that were responsible for the rebuild of the city. Now if you look to the right hand side, you see they are making some works here, but behind the works you see this big green area. This is one of Lisbon's public parks. It's called Edward VII's Park, in honor of the English King Edward VII that came to Portugal in official state visit in 1903. And if you look to the left hand side, to the base of the pedestal, you have some very nice sculptures at the base that represent some of those reforms made by the Marquis of Pombal that I was telling you about, in agriculture, in industry, in education, the rebuild of the city. Now we are already driving on Liberty Avenue. This is Liberty Avenue, the longest avenue of Lisbon. It has about 1.5 kilometers long, and it was opened in the second half of the 19th century. So what you see both sides of the road are 19th century buildings together with modern ones. We find here some hotels, insurance companies, travel agencies, restaurants, some shops, although this is not the main shopping area. And it's very interesting because before this avenue was open, the limits of the city, they were much further down, close to the river. Because as I told you, the oldest areas of Lisbon are to be found close to the Tagus River. But after they opened this avenue, they started to build more and more inland, and now the modern areas of Lisbon are to be found inland. Okay, so the oldest areas of Lisbon close to the river, and the modern areas of Lisbon more to the inland. Again, I want to call your attention to the sidewalks. As you can see, this very beautiful sidewalks paved with these small cubes of stone. Here you have this very beautiful pattern, but you'll be able to see other patterns around the city. And now, if you'll be so kind to look here to the right hand side, we have this white limestone memorial to the right, to the soldiers, the Portuguese soldiers that fought and died during the First World War, because Portugal entered the First World War at the side of the Allies. And we fought, our soldiers fought, not only in Europe, in France, but also in Africa, because as a result of our maritime expansion from the 15th and 16th century, we had colonies in Africa. We had Mozambique in the east coast of Africa, and on the west coast of Africa we had Angola, the Portuguese Guinea, some archipelagos, and some of these colonies had borders with the German colonies, so we had to go there and defend them. We have already our Christmas decorations, as you can see. We are about to drive past a very, very beautiful square called Restorer Square. We can already see in the center of the square this tall obelisk. So what we have around the square is late 18th century, 19th and 19th century buildings. It is called Restorer Square in honor of the Portuguese noblemen that were able to restore the Portuguese independence after 60 years of Spanish ruling. And here to the right-hand side, we have this very beautiful building. It is a 19th century building, a train station. Used to be a train station up to a month ago. Now they have closed the building. They are making some works, restoring. Now we are already driving past Rocio Square. This is Rocio Square, probably our most popular square here in Lisbon. This is not the official name of the square. The official name is Peter IV Square. Peter IV was one of our kings, the first emperor of Brazil. He's the man that is represented on the top of the pedestal in the center of the square. But no one here in Lisbon calls to this square Peter IV Square. Probably if you ask somebody here in Lisbon, where's Peter IV Square? Probably they don't know what you are talking about. Because everybody calls to this square Rocio Square. Rocio, R-O-S-S-I-O. Rocio, it's a word that means the heart, the center. Because although this is not the geographical center of Lisbon anymore, it was for many centuries the geographical center of Lisbon. But still nowadays it is a very alive area, Rocio Square. Even the even the subway station that comes up to here, it's called Rocio Station. And as you can see, if you look around the square, all the buildings around the square, they look alike. They are very plain, very sober architecture, because they are all 18th century buildings rebuilt after that earthquake that I was telling you about, the earthquake of the 1st of November 1755. Because all the area that we are going to drive past now, it was destroyed and then rebuilt after the earthquake. The only exception, the only 19th century building, it is this one in front of us with the columns. It is the National Theatre, where still nowadays the National Company of Theatre performs. And it is the only 19th century building because it was opened in 1846. All the others are 18th century buildings rebuilt after the earthquake. Now we are going to drive past the main shopping area. We're going to drive past on one of the main shopping streets. Street. There are three main shopping streets and then the side streets, of course, and this is called Golden Street. And you can see all the buildings, they look alike. They are all 18th century rebuilt after the earthquake. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to be so kind to look here to the right hand side now, please, to the right. For you to see this grey metal structure. Well, inside that structure there is an elevator, because the main shopping area that stretches to the left-hand side, it was built on this wide valley. But to the right-hand side, there is another hill called Chiado Hill that also makes part of the main shopping area. So to make easier the connection between this valley and the other hill, they made that elevator. It was opened in 1903, and it was made by a Portuguese engineer that studied with Eiffel, the man that made the Eiffel Tower. Now, the shops here at the main shopping area, they open at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they close at 7:30 in the evening. So even the ones that are coming with me in the optional excursion in the afternoon, we are going to arrive around about 5 o'clock, 5:15. So even then, if afterwards you want to return here to the city center to make some shopping or just to look around, you will be able to do that if you want to, because the shop, as I told you, only closes at 7:30 in the evening. Besides the shops, we have some head offices of banks here, as we have to the left hand side. This very beautiful building, it is the head office of a Portuguese bank. We also have some restaurants, some cafeterias here around this area. And now we are going to drive past perhaps our most imposing square. It's called Commerce Square. And here we have the tallest Christmas tree in Europe. It measures 72 meters high and it is the tallest Christmas tree in Europe, considered the tallest Christmas tree in Europe. Well, this is Commerce Square, as I told you. All the buildings, this is an 18th century square, again rebuilt after the earthquake. All the buildings that you see around the square are 18th century. Nowadays they belong to the government, they are ministries and things like that. The man that you see on horseback in the center of the square, it is our King Joseph I. So the man that was ruling Portugal at the time of the earthquake. And if you look to the left hand side, can you see up there those pine trees with a wall around them? Can you see it? That's St. George Hill, the highest hill of Lisbon, the birthplace of Lisbon, because as I told you, it was the first place to be inhabited here in Lisbon. We cannot go there because that's the oldest area here in our city, and the streets there are very narrow, very steep, so we cannot go there with these big motor coaches. That just by minibus or taxi.
It's okay.
But just for you to know that that hill up there with the pine trees, with the wall around them, that's St. George Hill, so the highest hill of Lisbon, also the birthplace of Lisbon. And we have the Tagus River in front of us, you see? This very wide river, it seems like the ocean, the sea, but it is not the sea, it is the ocean. I'm sorry, it is the river. The mouth of the river, the Atlantic Ocean, it's only to be found about 10 kilometers west from where we are. This is the Tagus River, and remember we are in the north bank, and just the north bank it's Lisbon. The other bank, the south bank, there are other cities, but it is not Lisbon anymore. Now we are going to show you Alfama. Remember I told you Alfama is considered the oldest district of Lisbon, what used to be back in the 8th century the Arab district, the Arab quarter. Now you see all these people coming here from the right hand side, they're coming from the other bank, because we have here to the right hand side a very large ferryboat station that brings people from the other bank of the river, from the south bank. They commute every day to work here in Lisbon. So if you look here to the left hand side, all this area to the left, this is the south slope of St. George Hill, okay, the south slope of St. George Hill, and this is Alfama. Alfama, it is an Arab word, in the Portuguese vocabulary, because we have as an heritage from the Arabs, among other things, about 1,500 Arab words in our vocabulary. The Portuguese language is by origin a Latin language, but we have about 1,500 Arab words in the Portuguese vocabulary. Alfama is one of them, and it means springs of water. Because when the Arabs arrived here in the 8th century, they found many springs of water, hot water, sulfuric water, so they decided to go to this area. Alfama. It means springs of water. As you can see, some of these buildings are very damaged, because this is the oldest area of Lisbon, although there are not Moorish houses left here anymore. There are no Arab houses left here anymore. What was left of them was destroyed by the earthquake of 1755. What we find here is 18th, 19th, 20th century buildings. Some of them are very degraded, but some of them look brand new because they have been restored again. Again, the town hall has a policy. And they are little by little restoring this old district. As you can see, many of the buildings here at Alfama, they are covered, they are lined, embellished with the panels of ceramic tiles. The facades of the buildings are embellished with the panels of ceramic tiles. And this is again a very Portuguese tradition, not just here in Lisbon, but all over the country. You'll find all kinds of buildings, not just the apartment buildings, but churches, palaces, train stations, all kinds of buildings embellished with the panels of ceramic tiles. It's very interesting because it were the Arabs back in the 8th century that taught to our potters, to the Portuguese artists, how to make the panels of ceramic tiles. And at least since the 15th century, the use of the panels of ceramic tiles became a very Portuguese tradition. So all this area to the left hand side, it is Alfama, the oldest district of Lisbon, or it used to be in the 8th century the Arab district, the Moorish district. So here to the right hand side, this pinkish building, it is the Fado Museum, the Museum of Fado. As you know, the Fado song, it is a traditional Lisbon song. You know, historians don't know very well the origins of Fado, still nowadays don't know very well the origins of Fado. They say it's probably a mixture of European, African, Brazilian sounds. But what they know for sure is that the Fado song was created here at Alfama. In this area of Alfama was where the Fado song was created, was invented back in the 19th century. Okay, back in the 19th century. A little bit along the port, along the Lisbon port, along the Tagus River. We are already on our way to Bethlehem, so now we are going to Bethlehem. But it didn't help the Portuguese economy. And also we had after the proclamation of the Republic, we had a very unstable political situation. Just so you to have an idea, the governments collapsed every 6 months. That's why just 16 years after the proclamation of the Republic, there was another revolution made by the militaries, and we became a dictatorship. So on the 28th of May 1926, so 16 years after the proclamation of the Republic, Portugal became a dictatorship. And this dictatorship was going to last for about 48 years, up to 1974. So the militaries, they held this revolution, they abolished the democratic constitution, they abolished all the civil rights of the people, and we became a dictatorship, although a moderate dictatorship. The militaries, they chose a group of civilians to govern the country, a group of civilians. Among them, there was a professor of the university called Salazar. I'm sure some of you have heard the name Salazar. Salazar became Minister of Finance. He was very good. He was able to solve the most important financial problems in Portugal. So in 1933 he became Prime Minister, and he ruled as a dictator up to 1968. So as I told you, we had no civil rights for the people. We had censorship during the dictatorship, censorship on radio, on press, later on television. We had political prisoners, all those who spoke badly about the government, about Salazar. They were arrested because there was...
You didn't get the top of it? Yeah. Looks like a lady.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I was telling you a little bit about the dictatorship, about the progress about the public investment made by the government of Salazar, by the dictatorship. And historians say that the last in San Francisco, California.
It's bigger. Right, modern day smaller.
You know that back in the 60s, there was no tradition here in Lisbon, in Europe, to build the suspension bridges. So the government of Salazar had to rely on the experience of the American engineers. That's why this build was made by the same engineers that had built the Golden Gate regime of Salazar. But afterwards, after the revolution that brought back democracy to Portugal, they changed the name of the bridge. Nowadays, this bridge is called 25th of April's Bridge. Okay? The bridge is called 25th of April's Bridge. Revolution that brought back democracy to Portugal in memory of the 25th of April 1974. Because we know we had been living in a regime of dictatorship for about 48 years, and also there was another thing but Salazar didn't want to give the independence to the colonies. War started
Worry about it.
in the colonies in Angola and Mozambique, in the Portuguese Guinea. And this war in the Portuguese African colonies was going to last for about 13 years, from 1961 up to 1974. So this war in the colonies, you can see the train now running underneath the bridge, you see? Inside is the metal structure of the bridge. Well, as I was telling you, so the fact that we had the regime of dictatorship going on for about 48 years, together with this war in the African colonies that were also lasting for about 13 years, became the main reasons for this revolution that was held on the 25th of April 1974, again here in Lisbon. It was held by the militaries, this time the young militaries, and they didn't harm the Prime Minister or the President of the Republic, but they had to go to exile, to Brazil, so they abolished the dictatorship. They wrote down a new constitution, they held parliamentary elections in 75, 1 year after the revolution, they released all the political prisoners, they abolished censorship. So on the 25th of April 1974, we became again a democratic republic. That's why they changed the name of the bridge from Salazar's Bridge to 25th of April, in honor of the date of the revolution that brought back democracy to Portugal.
Trying to get it on the other side.
That's a good, clear picture. And the picture of Christ on the bridge structure.
Way in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the back is a concrete pillar.
Oh.
And that's the figure of
Yes.
Yes. That's why I couldn't.
So ladies and gentlemen, we are about to enter Bethlehem district. Remember that district where we are going to India. Also, for example, Peter Álvares Cabral, the Portuguese man that found Brazil in 1500s, also set sail from here, from the beaches of Bethlehem district. So it's a district that is very much related to the Portuguese maritime experience. To the left-hand side, this brick building, brick laminated steel building, it was the first Lisbon's power plant, and now it is the Museum of Electricity. La torre, el padrón y después See this pinkish building to the right, 18th century pinkish building, that nowadays it is the official residence of our President of the Republic. We are going to drive past it again, so don't worry, we'll be able to see it again.
From another side.
Now here to the left hand side we have the memorial to Prince Henry the Navigator. It's going to be our second stop. And if you be so kind to look here to the right hand side, you can see St. Jerome's Monastery, 16th century monastery, third and last stop that we're going to make this morning. But the first is going to be close to what we call the Bethlehem Tower. The Bethlehem Tower, it is a 16th century fort. As you're going to see, although it's 16th century, it's very well preserved. It was even classified by UNESCO World Heritage, and it is classified by us Portuguese one of the jewels of the Manueline style. What is this Manueline style? It is a very Portuguese style that we can find only here in Portugal. It's a very original Portuguese style that you can only find here in Portugal because it was only made during the reign of our king Manuel, where it gets the name Manueline style. Well, Manuel the First, our King Manuel the First, he was a very important man. He was a man that financed the voyage of Vasco da Gama to India. He ruled Portugal between 1495 and 1521. And during all this time, all the buildings that were built, they followed this Manueline style. How can we recognize it? Structures from the late Gothic and from the Renaissance style, but it is different from both these styles. It is a style on its own. And we find some very beautiful motifs carved on the stone of these buildings, of these Manueline style buildings. So carved on the stone of these buildings Now here to the right hand side, we can see this memorial in the shape of a triangle, almost in the shape of a triangle. It is the memorial to the soldiers that fought and died in Africa. Remember, in the 60s we had that war going on in the African colonies that lasted for about 13 years. More than 1 million men were sent to Africa, more than 1,000 died. So that's the memorial to them. Here to the right hand side.
Golden Gate na lang. This is Belem Tower. It's a tower built to protect against the Moorish pirates.
Oh, really?
Like the San Francisco big bridge. San Francisco.
It's okay.
No, but it has a Portugal.
Portuguese Air Forces.
It does have that.
See?
Yeah. She's gonna tell us
We're a
what
week
she
away from the end of my trip and have almost all my gifts.
Lisbon, from Lisbon to Brazil to Rio de Janeiro in the seaplane just like this one. And sometimes people ask me if that's the German cross on the plane. It's not the German cross. That's the emblem of the Order of Christ. The Order of Christ was a 16th century order, military and religious order that was very wealthy. They read the Navigator. That, as I told you, this man, Prince Henry the Navigator, is considered the responsible for the first phase of the Portuguese maritime expansion up to the year up to his death in 1460. Nevertheless, the Portuguese maritime expansion began much earlier, in the beginning of the 15th century, in 1415. It was in a court of scientists, of mariners, of cartographers, and to kept sending ships, to kept sending expeditions to explore the west coast of Africa. And so he did gather this court of mariners and scientists, and he kept sending ships to explore the west coast of Africa. They opened, to commemorate the 500 years, they opened this memorial. This memorial, as you're going to see, it has the shape of the sails of a boat, the prow of a boat, the sails of a caravel, the Portuguese ship, and it has at the prow that man with a hat holding a small boat on his hands represents Prince Henry the Navigator. So, you have more sculptures of all the other people that were somehow involved in the Portuguese maritime expansion, that also made possible the Portuguese maritime expansion. So those mariners, cartographers, scientists, the writers that wrote about the expansion, the painters that painted about the Portuguese maritime expansion. So everybody that was somehow involved, that somehow made possible the Portuguese maritime expansion, they are represented here in the memorial. There's only one lady, one woman represented here. Is on this side, the second sculpture to the left. That lady with a crown. There's a lady with a crown on her head, and it is the only woman. It is because it is the mother of Prince Henry the Navigator, Philip of Lancaster, an English lady, an English princess that was married to our King John I. That was the mother of Prince Henry the Navigator. Now, facing the memorial to the left-hand side. To the left-hand side, we have on the ground, you see some people looking at the ground, because there, facing the memorial, there is a beautiful marble ground that was an offer from the side.
Have some more.
What's next?
You can all do that.
Cut off the line.
Lo 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 lo
Cantare.
Okay.
See part of independence and national pride for the Portuguese. You can see it now to the right. That is your. You can see how nice it looks. This
Wow.
decorated.
Nice.
And this place,
Oh, this one?
this place, Rocio.
Wow.
This is where you will end up if you take that the subway to that 7th stop that I told you. You can see is the National Theatre. This building to the right. Behind this building you can find a pedestrian street with lots of nice restaurants. But
Wow, look
to the
at this.
left, you can see this beautiful building, illuminated also. This is, as you can see, it says so here, the Hotel Avenida Palace. This was a nest of spies during the Second World War. Remember that Portugal was neutral during the Second World War, so they would gather here in this hotel, and sometimes they would receive orders or plan some operations. Ian Fleming himself, you know, he was the author of James Bond, but he was a spy during the Second World War. He was here in this hotel also himself. You know, his code name was GoldenEye. And in a moment you're going to see to the right the Hard Rock Cafe here in Lisbon. Those of you that may, because sometimes I get people that are, well, they go every place they go to the Hard Rock Cafe to buy a t-shirt or whatever. Now you know where the Hard Rock Cafe here is. It's a beautiful avenue. Now you can notice also those the decoration in the sidewalks. Well, this It looks very much like Castellana. Most expensive places to have something to drink around here in this area. In those terraces to the right you can see one. Now it's closed, of course. Another one to the right. It's closed because it's the winter time, and well, even though it is not very cold, the place open. During the day you may find, in a sunny day, this thing open during the winter. Y está preciosa Lisboa, Además está preciosa, ¿verdad? This important roundabout or square is the Marquis of Pombal. Remember? Pombal Square.
It's gone. It's gone. Check your bonbon. I'm sure we can find one tomorrow. Check your bonbon. Is that Rick?
It's too young.
No. The song.
Oh.
Here to the left, that you see that soccer. That's a soccer player. You can say that is the most right now famous soccer player in Portugal. He's called Cristiano Ronaldo.
I want to walk all the way up that hill.
Aquí por la derecha tienes Carrefour.